Hi, Tal. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here in the World Happiness Week. And there cannot be any better time for us to get together and talk about a topic that is so important, and that is post-traumatic growth. We've been going through so many difficult moments and experiencing so many different emotions, and it is very important to be able to learn how can we not only cope with the situations that we're experiencing, but also how we can learn and grow out of these experiences. So welcome, Tal. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you, Arlene. It's great to be here, and as you say, it's just wonderful to be celebrating happiness together in these non-trivial times. You know, Arlene, just recently a friend of mine said, "Tal, shouldn't we quarantine happiness at least until the situation changes or the threat subsides?" And as you pointed out, I think it is very important to talk about it, and certainly not quarantine it, because happiness can help us grow through difficult times.
Yeah,
You know,
that is actually something that a lot of people don't think about, that happiness gives you tools and buffers against trauma, against adversity, and it gives you tools to deal better with it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you studied it, you know it, because you studied positive psychology. But I often ask my students in class, many of them who studied general psychology, I ask them whether they know what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, everyone puts their hand up. Yeah, they know what it is. And then I ask them a second question, and I ask them whether they know what PTG is, post-traumatic growth. And very few, if any, put their hand up. Now, here's the thing. We are twice as likely to experience growth after trauma than disintegration. We're twice as likely to experience PTG, post-traumatic growth, as opposed to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. If, and this is the big if here, first of all, we know about the possibility of post-traumatic growth, and most people don't know, as you pointed out. And second, we need to know what conditions to put in place. And that's where the science of happiness comes in for difficult times, helping us understand what are these conditions that I can put in place, whether it's in my workplace, whether it's in my home, personally, professionally, individually, as well as collectively.
So before diving into the conditions that allow for post-traumatic growth to happen, it might be interesting to just mention the difference between resilience and post-traumatic growth, where resilience is this idea of bouncing back after trauma, of coming back to who you were before trauma struck, if that is possible at all, because I sometimes wonder about it. And post-traumatic growth being bouncing up or forward, right? It's like resilience 2.0, as I hear you calling it.
Yeah, it's interesting when we talk about resilience. It's about going back to where we were before. Post-traumatic growth, or a concept that was termed by Nassim Taleb from NYU, anti-fragility, is about growing stronger as a result. And you see processes around us and within us, in fact, that suggest the existence of post-traumatic growth, of anti-fragility. For example, lifting weights. You go to the gym, you stress your muscles, you're putting pressure on your system. As a result of that pressure, that system doesn't just go back to where it was before, you actually grow stronger, bigger, healthier. So there is a potential, often not realized, upside to stress, to hardship, to challenges.
And that is why so many people, after they experience trauma, they have a new conception of life, right? They understand life differently. They often change their priorities. They kind of get a sense of purpose and meaning, and the relationships change. these are qualities that characterize post-traumatic growth. And it has to do with what you're actually saying, with our capacity of integrating more than disintegrating, and then becoming stronger and more robust and able to cope.
Yeah, exactly. And we have that capacity. Now, it's very important, Arlene, and you and I talk about this a lot, not to belittle the hardships and the difficulties that people go through. What billions of people are going through right now is agonizing. It's painful. People who go through trauma, personal, professional, collective, they're struggling. One of the sound bites that I was raised on was things happen for the best. Mm-hmm. And I must say, as I became older and studied psychology, I realized that I actually don't believe that. I actually don't think that things necessarily happen for the best. However, I know that some people are able to make the best of things that happen. So it's not for the best that we had a COVID necessarily. It's certainly not for the best that so many people died around the world or are struggling financially around the world as a result. That's not for the best. However, it happened. It's here. That's part of reality. The question then is, what do we do with that given? In other words, how can we make the best of things that happen? And once again, this is where the science of happiness comes in, to provide us the tools, the interventions to make the best of a very difficult and challenging situation.
Yeah, these are difficult times, and it's important to keep in the perspective that your pain is yours to hold and is as valid as mine, and we can't compare it. But you talked about some, you mentioned that there need to be some conditions in place for post-traumatic growth to happen. And I think it would be very interesting to go into exploring those conditions. And many of those conditions actually relate very much to the SPIRE model that you have been developing over these years, where there is a component of spirituality that has to do with, meaning and being able to be in the present moment and taking care of your physical body and really enable your own energy to be, to let you be as capable as holding up to the stresses that you encounter in life. And of course, relationships, the number one predictor of happiness. So why don't you share with us more about it?
Sure. So, the SPIRE model, which defines, to my mind, happiness, SPIRE standing for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. Looking at that contributes to our happiness in good times. It turns out it also very much contributes to our well-being, to our resilience, to our anti-fragility in difficult times. So, for example, when it comes to spiritual well-being, the first element of SPIRE, it's about practicing mindfulness, being present, observing rather than fighting reality. It's about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in the hardship, in the difficulties. Then there is physical well-being. It turns out that people who exercise regularly are in a better position to deal with challenges. In other words, there is a real connection between physical toughness and mental toughness. Many of my students tell me, well, I'm not exercising as much as I did before because I can't go outside if there is a lockdown, or my favorite gym is closed. And my answer to that is, this is the most important time to exercise, even if you're exercising at home, walking around your room, jumping up and down on the spot. You need to move it, not just for physical well-being, also for psychological well-being. Then there is intellectual well-being. the I of Spire. And, learning new things can function as a buffer, whether we're learning new things about the science of happiness or new things about, our latest hobby. Just learning and curiosity contribute to our well-being. In fact, research came out recently showing that people who are curious actually live longer, which is quite a remarkable finding. Then there is relational well-being. You mentioned it, number one predictor of happiness. It's also the number one predictor of post-traumatic growth. Yeah. Having social support. Francis Bacon, 400 years ago or so, British philosopher, said, friendship doubles joy and cuts grief in half. And right now we certainly can do with cutting grief in half. And finally, emotional well-being. That's about cultivating pleasurable emotions like gratitude, like joy, like excitement, as well as embracing painful emotions. It's when we allow in unhappiness that we prepare ourselves for the happiness journey.
It's like the capacity of metabolizing whatever that you're feeling and being able to bring some agility into your emotional life. So some of us get stuck in these difficult moments and are not able to move forward. And it's important to presence the emotions and give it space, and also then to choose and move, like Susan David says, right?
Yeah, so that is so important, and we're speaking to people who are interested in happiness, and one of the gravest mistakes that so many of us make, those of us who study the science of happiness, who study positive psychology, is that somewhere in the back of our mind, we genuinely hope that we will get to a stage where we live a life of constant positive or pleasurable emotions. That's not possible. And the sooner we embrace and accept that hardships and difficulties and pain and sorrow and envy and anxiety, the sooner we accept that all these emotions are an inevitable part of life, the more open will be for happiness and for growth through hardship.
Yeah, and that's part of accepting also that adversity is a constant in life and that we cannot control what happens around us. But that's why it's so important also to use some reframing about the situations that we go through and to focus on those things that are under our control. And personally, I remember a time in my life where I experienced it was very difficult for me to wake up in the morning. And it's not that I had suffered any trauma personally at the moment, but just witnessing all the suffering around me was enough to keep me from really feeling connected to life. And it was through focusing on what I could do for others, which is also one of the conditions that make post-traumatic growth, like changing your focus from yourself to the other, and also finding meaning in, how can you add value to the world or to those around you. And I think those are, components that are very important to highlight in these times of, in times of despair, in times of suffering, that we can really shift our own awareness and the way that we feel by shifting our focus and our thinking strategies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'd like you to say a few more words about a point that you brought up, which is about contributing and giving and helping others as a way of shifting our focus and cultivating post-traumatic growth, cultivating anti-fragility. There is, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that one of the barriers for many people who aspire to happiness, one of the barriers is the notion that it's possible and desirable to lead a life of consistent happiness, a life of ongoing pleasurable emotions. And this expectation makes it less likely to come true. We need realistic expectations rather than imaginary ones. There's another barrier that has very much to do, Arlen, with what you brought up, and that is the very clear distinction that is made, especially in the West, increasingly more around the world, but it certainly started off in the West, the distinction between selflessness and selfishness. Many people who pursue happiness feel guilty at some point. They say, look, there are so many people around us who are struggling or suffering today, and I'm concerned about my own happiness. That's selfish. Now, it's true, it's selfish, it's thinking about oneself. But the next logical step is that is a bad thing. Why? Open the thesaurus, look for synonyms for the word selfish. What will you find? You'll find evil, you'll find bad, you'll find inconsiderate, you'll find egotistical, you'll find all negative connotations associated with selfishness, immoral. So no one wants to be immoral, evil, bad, inconsiderate, egotistical. But at the same time, we're also concerned about our happiness. So immediately we jump into an internal conflict when we pursue happiness, which is a selfish pursuit as well. On the other hand, we have selflessness. Selflessness, you open the thesaurus dictionary, what do you find? Selflessness is generosity, it's kindness, it's moral, it's helpful, and on all the good things, everything that we want to be, everything that we want to be perceived as by others. The thing, though, is that making this distinction hurts us and hurts others as well. Why? Because when I help someone, I feel better about myself. So is this selfless or selfish? I don't know. When I help myself, I'm much more likely to then help others. We know that generosity stems mostly from people who are kind to themselves first. So is that selfish or selfless? Well, it's neither and both. It's what I've come to call self-full. Selffulness is about bringing together, integrating, caring for self and caring for others. And that is the path to a happier individual, more anti-fragile systems, and to a happier world. Because it creates an upward spiral, a positive upward spiral of generosity. Helping oneself leads to helping others, which makes me more likely to help others, and on and on.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very interesting, and it reminds me of this metaphor about the universe and the planets and also the atoms and the molecules. It's like a mirror, if you see outside yourself or if you see within, you are kind of looking at the same thing. And I think this is very important because the better you are with yourself, the better you are with others. And oftentimes, if you are also able to see the value that you add into the world, you also gain back a sense of self that is stronger, more empathic, more able to relate, to others and to have compassion for others and for the self. So I like to think that this upward spiral that you talk about touches every one of us. We're not alone. We are in this together. And I think that common humanity is also part of what really is important for us to highlight when we are going through difficult times. We share an existence and we share a world, and it's very important to feel that we're part of something much bigger than our own selves.
There's a word in German, Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude really is a terrible word. It means reveling or taking pleasure in the pain of others. And, if we experience it, we experience it. Emotions are neither good or bad. They're just emotions. However, there's another side to observing other people's pain and suffering, which is beneficial to us psychologically and ultimately to everyone else. And that is that we're not alone. Because if I struggle and I misperceive that everyone else is doing great, my suffering will only intensify, because it will be augmented by my loneliness or by the notion or feeling that something is wrong with me. Whereas knowing that we're in this together, as you said, that we're going through hardship as a society or an organization or a family or a couple, knowing that we're not alone in and of itself can help us and others through the healing process.
Yeah. So Tal, what would be like the three main practices or tools that you suggest in both individuals and people in organizations can do to make their realities better, and also for them to strengthen their psychological immune system in order to better cope and grow out of their experiences?
Yeah, so, the first thing that I'd say is listen and be listened to. So share and open up to other people's sharing. And in this way, you're contributing to yourself, you're contributing to others. What our children, what our employees, what our partners and friends need more than what we need more than anything now is not someone to lecture us about why we should feel this way or that way, but rather we need to be listened to. Mm-hmm. And by doing it for others, we're contributing to them and of course to us, given the spiral of generosity. So the first thing is listening. The second thing is
Tal, can I ask you a question there? Because I think sometimes leaders in organizations say, if I listen to to the people who work in the organization and I listen to their struggles, I open the Pandora box and it leaves me in a very vulnerable space. So can you maybe add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So this is obviously an issue. And it's not an issue that we can or should ignore. The question is also, what's the alternative? Not opening that, so to speak, Pandora's box, that guarantees that the potential of the individuals and the organization will not be fulfilled. Opening up or listening, encouraging others to open up, yes, may lead to some difficult and challenging situations. At the same time, it can also lead to growth and development. And just as any business to succeed sometimes needs to take risks, because if it doesn't take risks, then if it's easy, then everyone else would have done it as well. In the same way, on the psychological level, it is about taking some risk. Now, the way to mitigate that risk is to manage expectations. Going into a meeting and saying, well, let me know what you're thinking, and I'm going to implement every single one of your suggestions, unrealistic unless you can really follow up on that, and harmful. But saying, look, I really want to know what you have to say. I can't promise that I'll implement all your suggestions, but I promise to really listen. And people get it. Most people get it and understand that it's not possible nor realistic to introduce and incorporate everything.
Yeah, and by doing that, I think you open a safe space for psychological safety, where you as a leader are able to share your own vulnerability, to be honest, which are components that really help the organization strengthen.
Exactly right. Psychological safety is about feeling comfortable taking risks, feeling comfortable saying, I don't know, admitting mistakes, and admitting vulnerability and imperfections. Mm-hmm. And these all ultimately, in the short run, they're difficult, challenging, but ultimately, they're the very things that contribute to healthy organizations, healthy teams, also healthy families.
Yeah.
So listening is the first thing, again, whether it's at home to our kids or in our organization to our colleagues. And equally finding people who will listen to us, where we can open up and share. And again, that could be a partner, it could be a professional or a colleague. Next, it's about finding times for recovery. You know, physical exercise is a form of recovery from the day-to-day pressures. Getting a good night's sleep is a form of recovery. Meditating or just breathing deeply is a form of recovery. A vacation, whether it's a staycation at home or being able to go to another country, that's a form of recovery. And we need to introduce those on a daily, weekly, and ultimately yearly basis if we are to fulfill our potential and grow in the midst of hardship. Because just like in the gym, if you continue to lift weights and more weights and more weights, you'll get injured, you'll burn out. You need recovery, whether it's as a professional, as a parent. Easier said than done in today's reality, and yet even the small pieces of recovery, the small, what I've come to call islands of sanity throughout the day, week, year, are critical for post-traumatic growth, for becoming stronger during these times.
Yeah, like and, even three short breaths once in a while, taking a 5-minute break every hour that you are stuck in the computer, walking around the block. Those really allow you for some space, and they give you, they bring more clarity to your mind. Exactly. And they do wonders. It's amazing.
Yeah. Exactly. And then and finally the last of the three would be something that positive psychologists talk about a lot, which is gratitude. Even in the most difficult and challenging of times, we can find something, even if it's a little thing, that we can be grateful for. I always I keep a gratitude journal. I've doubled up on that during this period. When I wake up in the morning, I think about things for which I'm grateful. Then I think about things that I'm looking forward to during the day, which is based on research by Dr. Dina Neer, showing the benefits of that. And then before I go to bed, with the family on a regular basis, we go around the table and express gratitude. And it's so important to remind ourselves that even in the midst of hardship, we can still find those sparks of joy. And those sparks of joy are meaningful, they're important. They are potentially the trigger for post-traumatic growth, for anti-fragility.
Yeah, in a study that was conducted a few weeks ago, they found out that during the pandemic, people have been actually feeling very grateful for many things. They have come to appreciate the little things in life, and they expect they will be even feeling more grateful in the future. It is like really coming back to this idea of prioritizing differently the way we see life. And yes, gratitude is like they call it the mother of all virtues, and I think it is quite so. So, well, talking about gratitude, I want to thank you very much, Tal, and thank you everyone else for listening. And if you are curious about Tal's work and the certificate in happiness studies, please go to our virtual booth and inquire more. I think it always surprises me, Tal, that if in 20 or 30 minutes we are able to get so much benefit and information and tools to use, what does a year-long program offer? It is quite life-changing.
Well, it's the science of happiness is so important now because there's a lot of talk about getting the vaccine, the physical vaccine out there. it's no less important to get the psychological vaccine out there. And in that respect, the science of happiness can really help get this vaccine out to more and more people.
Yes, I can testify to that. So thank you, Tal, so much. I will be grateful tonight for this opportunity, and thank you everyone else for joining and listening. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and enjoy the Happiness Week.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you all.